Hey everybody, welcome to the last unit of this semester. It's crazy to think about how quickly this flew by. A 6-week Pro Tools course. Wow, a lot of information to take in. And I'm just hoping to wrap this up in a way that we started with the basics, right, of just setting up a good workflow and then work through all the different steps of the audio production process. Now we've ended up here at the pre-mastering and the mastering process, our finalization stages. So let's unpack what these terms mean. And over the course of the module, I'll supply you with some tips, techniques, tools, and even philosophies about this mastering process. So let's get started. So the big question that I always get every semester is, what is mastering? I ask this question to students, and I usually get these vague answers because it is kind of this mystical process. What mastering is it's essentially the final step in our audio production process. This is where we're really trying to make sure we balance the sonic elements in the mix, and we create a sense of cohesion for the overall song and ultimately the overall audio project. This may be your EP, your full-length album, or any kind of larger audio work that needs to be tied together. In addition to this, creating cohesion, across a song, across an album, we're also trying to make sure that the audio sounds good on every playback device possible, right? So that way it doesn't only sound good on our fancy, studio monitors, speakers, and headphones, but that it also sounds good on iPhone speakers, right? On car stereos, the sources that we listen to the most, and getting a consistent quality across all devices. All right? So what's interesting about the mastering process to me is that we're actually using the same tools we've been using this whole time. We're using things like equalization, compression, limiting, stereo enhancement, right, to create a wider stereo image. And essentially, we're just using these tools in a more subtle way and in a bigger picture way, so that way we can get a nice cohesive song album that plays evenly across all media platforms. All right, so this is what I've been saying. It's about creating a cohesive feeling, right? And think about it this way. If you get a Kendrick Lamar album, like I have tucked over here, that album sounds good in a vinyl format. It sounds good on a CD, playing across Spotify, on YouTube, etc., etc. And a lot of that has to do with the mastering process. And so the other thing we're doing when we're mastering is that we're making sure we're catching any of those small mistakes, especially the ones that tend to come in as we're adding effects, right? Sometimes when we add distortions or different plugins, we'll get little hisses, audio artifacts, clicks, pops, hums, all these little things. And again, the goal here is to create uniformity, consistency, and really have a good balance overall. This is really our biggest picture scope. If editing is all about the small, micro, tedious picture, mastering is looking at the broadest level we can look at. All right, so people master to make sure their music sounds great on every platform, and to also make sure that their music sounds the way they intended it to sound, right? Sometimes when we go through the editing and the mixing process, we make decisions that in hindsight we're like, oh, this didn't translate to what I heard in my head. I maybe pictured a fuller sonic palette, and perhaps my mix just isn't as full and lively as I imagined it in my head. The mastering process is making sure we get to that final picture, that final vision that you had all along. All right. So I like to think of the mastering process in stages, not just one, area where we put on a bunch of effects, but I like to think of the mixing process as part of the mastering process, right? Then a pre-mastering process that kind of functions as this transitional stage between mixing and full-on mastering. It's like our final check before we really get into mixing, and then finally mastering. All right, so let me just clarify the distinction between what mixing is versus what mastering is. When we're focusing on mixing, we're focusing on the multi-track, the multiple tracks and sonic elements that exist in the mix. We're paying attention to balancing these multiple tracks with each other, right? When we get to the mastering stage, we're thinking about this final polish. We're thinking about the song or the project as one whole unit, as opposed to mixing, where we're thinking about individual parts that we're trying to combine and balance together. All right? So that's what mixing is. It's about getting the individual parts to work as a song. Mastering, or the mix down, is making sure that all of these elements are in place, right? Mastering then ends up being like this final polish, this final shine that you add to your mix. All right, so that's what we'll be talking about for the rest of this module. And I'll try and make sure I send you off with some techniques so that way at this point you can record a whole song and do a little mastering all the way through. All right, so I will see you next video, and let me know if you have any additional questions. All right, bye.